Our lesson this morning comes from the Gospel of Luke, chapter 13, verses 6 through 9, and this is the parable of the fig tree. Jesus told this parable. A man owned a fig tree planted in his vineyard. He came looking for fruit on it and found none. He said to his gardener, "Look, I've come looking for fruit on this fig tree for the past 3 years, and I've never found any. Cut it down. Why should it continue depleting the soil's nutrients?" The gardener responded, "Lord, give it 1 more year, and I will dig around it and give it fertilizer. Maybe it will produce fruit next year. If not, then you can cut it down."
How do you feel about failure? How do you feel about second chances? Since I didn't know that Colleen was going to talk about when I realized that she was not herself and needed to go to the emergency room and she got a second chance, it's must be a God moment that this is the message that came to my heart this week, so that we can share the last part, or the last installment of the Mr. Rogers sermon series next Sunday on All Saints Sunday, which is about heaven. So, second chances and failure and getting another opportunity. When I lived in Indianola, Iowa, which is just about 15 miles south of Des Moines, I was a pastor in the area. I heard about a young woman named Lolo Jones. She is an Olympian. She participated in the 2000, let's see, which one was it? 2008 Beijing Olympics and the 2012 London Olympics. And she was a runner. She was a student at a high school, Roosevelt High School, near where, about 50, in Des Moines. She and her mother, she didn't really know her father. He was in and out of her life. Her mother and she at one point had to live at the Salvation Army shelter in Des Moines, and she was, because they moved a lot, She was always going to new schools. It was very, very difficult. When her mother found a job in another town, the community of Roosevelt High School and friends and neighbors got together to surround Lola because she was very good at track, and they wanted her to be able to stay and continue her running track at Roosevelt High School. So different families, 4 different families said, you can stay with us. You can live with us while you finish up your senior year. And they arranged for her not only to be able to stay at the high school, but to be part of the Des Moines youth track team. They got her braces because she needed braces. And they made sure that she got everything she needed so that she could study hard, get good grades, and go to college on a track scholarship, which is what ended up happening. She attended Louisiana State University and worked odd jobs while running track in college. Now, I told you that she ran in the 2008 Beijing Olympics in an event that she was expected to win. But she came in in the 2008 Olympics, she clipped a hurdle. She was expected to win that race way above everybody else. But the last hurdle she flew over. She clipped that hurdle and she didn't win. And then in the 2012 London Olympics, in the 100-meter hurdles, she came in 4th. Again, she was expected to win, and she came in 4th. And on her website, she wrote, "I'm inspired by failure. The process of defeat, picking yourself back up again, is the hardest thing in the world." And after her Olympic dream of medaling did not come through, she didn't give up. And in October of 2012, she was invited to be part of the American national bobsled team. And she wasn't in the Olympics, but she was in the national championship competition, and her team won gold. Second chances and turning around failure and looking at it differently. Well, in the parable of the fig tree, Jesus challenges us to look for the fruit. For 3 years, the vineyard owner, and I understand the vineyard owner. I planted stuff 3 years ago, and why isn't it bearing fruit, or why isn't it flowering? If Barb Tenpass plants it, it grows like crazy. All the stuff that was in our garden and all the snapdragons, but sometimes if I planted, it's like, oh, it's just kind of lying there. So I get that the vineyard owner was expecting his 3-year-old fig tree to bear fruit, and it didn't. And so he says, cut it down. Cut it down. He doesn't want to look at it anymore. But the gardener sees things differently. The gardener says, oh, just give me 1 more year. Let me fertilize it. Maybe it just needs some manure. And my dad called horse hockey. He always went to the nearby stable to get his horse hockey. But let me tend to it, and let's just give it another chance. Let's don't look at it as failure and it's over. So how are we like the characters in this parable? Well, as a vineyard owner, we can identify with feeling frustrated at failure. We can identify with feeling irritated and just wanting to give up. I've done everything I can. I'm tired. I'm going to give up. And whether it's our failure or the failure of others, we would just as soon be rid of the problem so that what happens is we just replace it with something else. Or perhaps something isn't going our way and we just say enough and give up and try something else. So sometimes we're like the vineyard owner. Sometimes we're like the fig tree. We take up valuable space and yet we don't seem to be producing anything. We're waiting, we're learning. Perhaps we need some kind of nourishment or manure. We are called to bear fruit, but maybe just for right now, for some reason, things going on in our life, we're not bearing the fruit that we wish we could. And then sometimes we may be the gardener in the story. We see hope, not looking at the tree as a failure and as a waste, but as something that just needs a little extra time and love and care. We don't just immediately see the lack of fruit as failure, but we see that we're not going to give up because this just needs a little bit more time, a little bit more nurture. The gardener offers us hope in the story, even if we can't see it ourselves. The gardener reminds us that all of us need care, and that the gardener meets us where we feel empty or shut down or not productive, and tenderly feeds us and cares for us. And the gardener reminds us in the story, the fig tree has purpose. It has meaning because the gardener believes in the fig tree. In telling this parable, Jesus was talking to the people in the community around him that he'd been preaching to because they were panicked. They were afraid, and they had every reason to be. Pilate was killing people who were followers of Jesus. Bad things were happening. They were already oppressed, and they couldn't pay their taxes. They were so poor. And so they were trying to figure out, what might I have done or we have done to deserve this treatment from the Roman government around us? And Jesus is saying, that's not what you need to do. You don't need to try to figure out, what have I done that's causing these things to happen to me? Instead, Jesus says, I understand that you're afraid, and it's okay to feel fragile, to feel vulnerable. As long as you keep turning toward the light, as long as you keep turning toward that gardener who believes in you and loves you and thinks that you just need more time, you deserve a second chance. I think what Jesus is trying to tell them, and what I hope that you can hear and what I need to hear, is that terrible things happen to us and to those we love and to others, and there's not always something you can blame or something you can say, this is what I did and that's why it's happening to me. Your heart may be torn up and you may feel like a failure, but that's an opportunity for holiness. That's an opportunity for God to work God's sacred power and spirit inside of you, with the hurt and with the feelings of failure and disappointment. So when you feel that sense of, I might as well just cut this down, or I should be cut down, I'm not producing anything, just remember that the gardener, Jesus, gives every one of us a second chance because of the gardener's extravagant love. Amen.